Hello and welcome to the Avrum Rosensweig.
That'll do.
Welcome to one of the internet's best podcasts, where we dive deep into the lives of the extraordinary and fascinating people who leave an indelible mark on our world. Join us as we explore their captivating stories, remarkable achievements, and unique perspectives that shape history and inspire generations. Get ready to embark on a journey through the lives of inspiring people unlike any other.
Hello, welcome to the Avrum Rosensweig show. My name just happens to be Avrum Rosensweig, and it's delightful to be here with you. Thank you for listening and thank you for watching. This show can be found on YouTube and all major social media outlets that sponsor or that have podcasts. So we're really, really happy about all of this. This is my 77th show in my new iteration of my podcast, and it's just getting more and more exciting. The guests are, the energy is, and I think that the message is getting out there, and people are growing through the podcasts as I am. The idea behind the podcast really is to give humankind a pat on our back, or on its back. It's the idea that what we have done throughout history is absolutely brilliant. Our creations, the things we have written, poetry, the love that has developed between peoples. And I think that if we were more focused on that, on our successes, that the world would probably be a bit more at peace. At a recognition of the positivity within humankind is a road, in fact, to a greater connection with others, to a greater connection with peace and love. So that's what I want to do here. I want to bring that out through inspirational guests. And we've seen throughout the course of my podcast that there have been some incredible individuals who have been with us. Individuals like Noah Braun, who's the CEO of Israel's Center for Guide Dogs. And I didn't say that right, but it's something like that. It's a brilliant, brilliant man who decided that Israel needed an environment, a center, an organization which could cater to the needs of those who are visually impaired. And he started one, and he is still running it. And when you listen to the interview with Noah Braun, you can be incredibly motivated to find the beauty within your soul, within your life, as he has done through the creation of this center. Now, today, I'm interviewing a very dear friend, someone whom I've known for a long time. His name is Brian Prousky. How are you, Brian?
Very well, thank you, Avrum. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so this is our second iteration. This is our second interview.
That's right. Yes, but under different circumstances.
Different circumstances, because Brian is formerly the CEO or the executive director of the Jewish Family and Child Service in Toronto, social worker from way back. And that at some point in time, he left that job, which was an incredible gig, did a wonderful job there, and he committed to writing, to being an author. Now, you used a term before in our pre-interview, which was "I'm outed." What did you mean by that? I'm outed.
Well, I outed myself because, for the majority of my life, I've been a secret author. In fact, when you interviewed me the first time, you would have had no idea.
Yeah.
At the time you interviewed me, I was the author of 4 novels, a book of short stories, and a book of poetry. But I was writing, on weekends and overnights and between meetings, sometimes during meetings.
Yeah, right.
It was the life I always imagined for myself in my 20s. So outed, sure. I mean, I outed myself.
Why were you so secretive about being a novelist?
You know what? I guess I just wasn't ready for there to be 2 iterations of myself in the world. It's probably as simple as that. Now, I came very close in my mid to late 30s. I had written it was my second novel. Yeah, my first novel was a disaster. I destroyed it, threw it away. I think every novelist, every artist probably has like a a trail of just debris in their wake.
No, full garbage, right?
Yeah, garbage first, second, third attempts, whatever they are. But I wrote a novel and I submitted it to one of the largest literary agencies in New York City in my 30s, and got an email back from a fairly prominent agent about 4 days later. Saying, "I'm reading your book. I love it."
Wow.
I thought, wow, that was easy. And then I ended up signing a contract the next week for that novel, for her to represent me for that novel. And she said, "Hey, Brian, you need to cut out 50 pages from that book." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "It's a bit epic-y. It's, a bit long. I know what I'm doing. Just trust me." And I said, "But why? Why would I just,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
It felt like the first novel is, it's a very personal thing and stuff like that. It would have felt like I was cutting a limb off at the time. Anyway, she basically said, "Are you going to do it or not?" And I said, "I don't think so." And so she told me to, F off, or in a nice way, basically, "Go away. You're too much trouble than you're worth at this point." Anyway, fast forward 20 years or so, I'm reading a book on Ernest Hemingway, and his first book he sends to F. Scott Fitzgerald. And Fitzgerald says, "It seems like your book starts about 50 pages into the first chapter. And if you want to get it published, you might want to do something." And Hemingway goes, "Yeah, cut out those. I don't care. Cut those pages out."
Like, I don't give a shit.
Like, what did I do?
Yeah. Is that a great regret? Do you have a great regret?
Yeah. I have a
For
lot
sure.
of
Oh,
yeah.
so do I. What do you think of people who say they have no regrets? What do you think of that?
Yeah, that's crap. I mean, how can you go through life and not regret anything?
I
Have
know.
you never had a single conversation or a transaction with another human being where you didn't behave optimally? Is that possible? No.
Yeah, exactly.
There's not a single person who doesn't harbor a regret about something. If they do, they're stupid, or they live in a kind of perpetual bliss, I guess. That's
I know. Very like, I'll go to a simcha, I'll go to a wedding or a bar mitzvah or something, and I'll say the stupidest thing to a friend that I haven't seen in years, and I'll come home, I'll go, "What was I saying? What was I doing?" Right? So you're absolutely right. Now, Brian, I have some great news for you.
Yes.
We have sponsorship for this show.
Oh, okay. Does that mean I'm getting paid?
Yeah, finally we're going to get a little bit of money in from the show. It's not easy to get sponsorship for a podcast, but I want to tell you who our sponsors are. The Avrum Rosensweig show is sponsored by the Professional Center. It's Toronto's premier co-working space at 120 Adelaide, where more is the standard. The industry leader since 1987, TPC offers private and team offices, fully equipped meeting rooms, collaborative workspaces, premium amenities, and exceptional hospitality. You can book a day, you can book a week, you can book however long you want, escape work from home distractions, and discover more privacy, more productivity, and more community at TPC. For more information, visit theprofessionalcenter.com. You can see that down at the bottom. If you mention Avrum, Avrum, you get 10% off private offices and meeting rooms. So what this is they've essentially leased like a huge amount of space at 120 Adelaide, which is a beautiful building. It overlooks the lake, and you can rent yourself like a little parcel of it and use their resources, like their fax machine. No, nobody has fax machines anymore, do they, Brian?
I have one in my basement.
Does it work?
It might work.
Can you find out?
Would you like it?
No, I don't.
Yeah, I think doctors' offices or lawyers' offices.
Well, yes, maybe they do.
Yeah.
But check out the Professional Center. If you need office space, they're wonderful people. Now, I really like what you've written as your bio, which one can find on your website and many, many other websites, that are reflective of your writing. So I want to read a little bit of it. Brian Prousky spent most of his life as two distinct people. The first held a day job and raised a family and was public and sociable. The second ruminated over sentences and wrote books in secret and dreamed of living a literary life. They shared little in common, mostly their obsessions: Bob Dylan, Joni Mitchell, Mozart, Saul Bellow, Robert Bolano, tennis and hockey. Go Leafs go. somehow summoning up a kind of courage or resolve he assumed was absent from his DNA. The first Brian Prousky left his day job, revealed his secret, and dedicated himself full time to writing. And the two Brian Prouskys became one, right? Now, the author of 4 novels, a collection of short stories, and 2 books of poetry, he lives and works in Toronto, where most of his characters, who struggle with secret and often conflicted lives of their own, and who never quite fit in, do as well. So there's a lot more to say, and we're going to cover it throughout our interview. I just want to go back to the genesis of this whole thing. When you were the executive director at the Jewish Family and Child Service, did you have visions, images in your head as to what it would look like for you to be a writer? Did you see it in your head?
So I've been seeing it in my head since my 20s. I'll be quite honest with you. I just never had the courage to take the leap. And I've told this story often. And if I've told you, forgive me for repeating it. But again, I never, I was never willing to die for it, I guess, is the way I would put it, to take a big risk on myself. My daughter, conversely, Lauren, is an artist, and she completed her undergrad and said, that's it. I'm making my living as an artist, and whatever comes of it, comes of it, but I'm going to wake up every day and do exactly what I want to do with my life. And she is now a working artist. She had a show at the AGO. She's had residencies all over the world, and she's doing it. And for that, I often say, she's my hero.
What's the fundamental difference between you and her? Why could she and you couldn't?
You know what? Maybe she had really supportive parents who,
with a little cash behind too, right?
Well, a little bit of help, but she's doing it on her own. She has to work on the side, but her work is on the side work. And I was, again, I think there were creature comforts I wasn't willing to forego.
Like what?
I think that I needed some financial stability. I needed the comfort of having a job, a future career. I needed something to fall back on. I needed a safety net. And I think that, again, I wish I had had the courage to venture out without that safety net, but I didn't. I think it had a lot to do with the fact that I had a pretty bad case of psoriasis as a kid. And like 70 or 80% of my body was covered with psoriasis. And it made me a bit of a loner and a bit risk averse, even to wear short sleeve shirts in the summer, stuff like that. Who knew 5 decades later, you could just take a pill every day, it would go away. But when I was young, it was a nightmare,
I didn't take off my shirt for 10 years in public, like on the beach, because I had such bad acne on my back.
Right.
It was also on my face, and I have scars today. So it was terrible, wasn't it, going through that?
Yeah, it was terrible. I pursued every cure, every good and bad cure, with the help of my parents. I went to the Dead Sea every year for, a month and a half and lay in the sun for 4 or 5 years. My skin would clear up, but then the minute I left, it would just start coming back.
How was it meeting girls?
It was impossible for me. I was way too self-conscious to meet girls. It wasn't until I had gained some control over my skin that I went out and met some girls. I did have some literary inspiration, though. There was a writer, the writer John Updike, had terrible psoriasis. In fact, wrote a story called, or a biographical story called "The War with My Skin," I believe it's called. I met him briefly at the Dead Sea for about 5 minutes. Yeah. Nothing substantive or anything, any conversation. It was just pointed out to me that, that's a writer named John Updike, who must have been just traveling through and visiting and wondering where, like, people with psoriasis like him went to get cured. to find some relief, you know?
Yes, respite. When you were a social worker and doing your work at JF&CS, were there ever times that you dealt with clients who just happened to have psoriasis and you had advice for them?
Yeah, of course I did, because my brother was a naturopath and helped me, to a great extent. Follow a certain diet, avoid certain foods, certain excesses, things like that. That really did help my skin stay under control once I reached my mid-20s or so. Yeah.
And your skin today?
Well, it's pretty clear today because I take a biologic, every day that they have now. So,
Can you remember those days when it wasn't good?
of course I can. Yeah.
And you can remember the feelings?
I sat in my room and I read all day.
Did you?
I watched the world. I watched people have fun all around me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Although I have to say that, when it was clear, my skin was clear at the Dead Sea, and I had a couple weeks in Israel after my skin cleared up. There were a lot of men and women in a similar situation that I was in, and it certainly was a fun party to attend. We had a lot of time to make up for. So
Well, good for you.
So I'll say that when you asked me about girls, I guess it was like being a fireman. For me, going out with girls, it was like short bursts of energy as I was growing up for minimal amounts of time, and then hibernation for the rest of the time.
Your mom is Sheila. She's still with us. Unfortunately, she's not well. We wish her peace.
Thank you.
And your father was Victor. How were they in terms of all of this? Were they able to impart wisdom and the sense of safety and love and security and hugs to you? Or were they, my parents were very much from the old generation, where they really weren't able to impart much to me because of my acne and things like they tried to take me to the right doctors,
Right.
but I never felt as though, okay, so this is good advice. What were your parents like that way?
Well, my mother was a perpetual teenager. She had a Kawasaki motorcycle for a while. I think she was kind of stalled at age 17 or 18 and lived a blissful, happy, big life. My father was an incredibly loving man. He had he had parents who he was the center of their universe. There's 5 kids in my family. We all felt like his favorite. He was a kind man, a gentleman. He was, although I've been told in business, he was a lawyer. He was fairly ruthless, apparently, in business. But that side to his family, we never saw it. I mean, there wasn't a time when I didn't see one of my sisters or little brother or someone asleep lying on top of them on the on the couch, or he wasn't hugging someone or expressing his love to us. Now, my parents, though, were on vacation probably half the year. My house was a party. If you talk to people of a certain generation in Toronto, everyone knew about Hampshire Court. It was on about an acre of land. There was a tennis court, a pool. There were wild parties, beginning when, at the first hint of summer until Labor Day, from Friday evening until Sunday night. It wouldn't have been unusual for me to walk out into the backyard, the pool area, and find people who weren't married to one another lying on a chaise lounge. I wrote a lot about it in my first book, Auden Triller is a Killer. So I was raised by a nurse named Miss Lucy and a series of housekeepers and my grandparents. And my parents were in Las Vegas and traveling all over the world most of the time.
So how grounded are you, or were you?
Funnily enough, my 3 sisters and a brother, we all get along. I would say we're all fairly well grounded. There wasn't a single rule in my house. No one taught me to brush my teeth or any other hygienic stuff. wasn't part of their makeup. I never had a bedtime. I didn't have anything like that. But I definitely had my father's love and respect, and he would have supported any decision I would have made. And I think that's where the grounding comes from. If you know anything about, like object permanency, the more comfort or secure you feel with the primary objects in your life, your parents, the more confident you are out in the world. So, and I had a lot of confidence out in the world.
Do you have a wild side, or do you pass that on to your kids at all?
I don't think I have a wild side. Again, that probably comes from always being really self-conscious of my skin, of myself, of my body, of things like that. So I think I'm always guarded in some way, or I'm not comfortable in my skin, so I'm constantly aware of myself. I'm in check always.
How long have you been married?
33 years.
And it works. Your marriage with Lisa works.
Yeah.
Are you open then? Are you able to express yourself?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Lisa is she's an unbelievable person, incredible person. Yeah. I met Lisa. She was from Montreal, most of the Jews that I met. After a certain age, they all seem to be from Montreal. But Lisa was from Montreal. She was here attending law school. She just done a master's degree at the London School of Economics. My mother's best friend had remarried after her husband died, and married one of Lisa's uncles, I think, or a close family friend. And my mother had found out about Lisa. This person apparently was new to Toronto, going to law school, didn't have friends. Of course, the irony is I had 2 or 3 friends. Lisa had dozens and dozens of friends. She was independent, professional. I mean, I had just come out of a couple of relationships with very needy women, and Lisa absolutely didn't need me, and I fell in love with that. The fact that she had this life, this big life, and she had her own passions and pursuits, and she was becoming a lawyer, and she was confident in herself and her ability, and she was intelligent, and I don't think there's a better aphrodisiac than a really intelligent woman.
No, very, very true. No, Brian, you didn't need her to need you.
That's right. Yeah.
And are you still like that?
Yeah. And I think it works really well. I mean, the advice I often give both my kids, of course, if they fall in love, I'm going to fall in love as well with their spouses and things like that.
Yeah.
But I want them to fall in love with someone who can get their needs met in the world. I don't want them to fall in love with someone, for whom they're going to have to be a caretaker for life, whether it's an emotional or physical or financial caretaker or whatever. I don't want them to suffer the burden of that in their lives. I want them to meet someone who's, has strength of character and is a partner to them. So that was important to me. Yeah, critical.
I think the thing that always intrigued me about you, like I haven't done 2 interviews with a lot of people, but I am with you, because I've always been deeply intrigued by, you're right, by the Brian, we'll call it the Brian 1, the Brian 2. I've actually developed that on my own. I have an Avrum 1 and an Avrum 2, because I need to create rules for myself. If I don't, I get totally lost. And your Brian 1 is like, you were the director of one of the biggest organizations in the Jewish community, one of the most important, if not the most important.
Right.
And in the community in Toronto and Ontario and perhaps Canada, like JFNCS is huge.
Yes.
And it's a really important place. It helps out a lot of people who are suffering from so many different things, loss, grieving, poverty.
Yeah.
Like your work was unbelievable. And the work of the organization is incredible. But you didn't fit the mold, as far as I saw it, of the, sort of the typical CEO or executive director. You're a jolly sort of guy. You got an interesting sort of bounce to you. Whenever we would talk, I would always find it fascinating in a rich way, poetically, literarily, and so on. and there you are now. You're a novelist. Was it hard to fit in, or did you fit in okay into that world?
I think I fit in okay into the world. I mean, I'm an acquired taste, I believe,
Yeah, you are.
a little bit. But, I think in many ways, I had an affinity and an immediate connection for the frontline staff there, more than I had for the senior managers, because I was a frontline staff at the beginning of my career at JF&CS before I went off and worked at other places. And I don't think I ever lost the sensibilities of being, a frontline worker in an agency like that. I knew that I was doing something right when I was on the subway and a worker at JF&CS happened to be on the subway, and he looked at me and he said, "You're probably the first executive director at JF&CS that's ever taken a subway."
No.
Toronto. And I thought, that's good. And I did some, kind of crazy stuff when I first got there. I decided I'd open up our senior management meetings to anyone who wanted to attend, any frontline staff that wanted to attend. I tried to make things as transparent. We talked about some of this stuff. I think the last time we chatted.
Yeah, we did. We did.
I mean, because what big secrets was I keeping from the people I actually needed to do a good job? And the irony of being a senior manager is that, the decisions I made as a frontline staff working at a child welfare agency were the most difficult decisions I made in my entire career. And that was my first few years as a social worker. I was making decisions about whether children would remain with their families. I never made decisions that were that difficult again as an executive director. So, I mean, the frontline staff deserved, all my attention and all my support.
Did they come out? Did frontline staff come out to senior management meetings?
Yeah. Some of them.
And was senior management cool with that? Were they okay?
They were okay up until about 4 or 5 or 6 months in, saying that, we're performing a bit here. It's become a bit performative. And we actually need time to talk about things that are important just with you in these meetings. So is it okay if we, kind of scale things back? And I went, oh, yeah, that would make sense to me. All right, you guys,
Did they like you? Did senior staff like you?
I think I would say that half of them liked me, liked working with me a great deal. A couple maybe tolerated me. One did not like me. It was a mixed bag, I suppose. It mostly had to do with personality and ideology and philosophy and culture and things like that. That was fine with me. I think the frontline staff, for the most part, respected me. And that was always my goal. And so did the middle managers as well, I believe. So that's kind of my goal.
I remember through my work in the Jewish community and nonprofit sector, I was the director of an organization called Via Havda.
Yeah.
Sometimes I would be sitting around the table with major donors, people extremely wealthy, or very, very important volunteers, board members, and so on. And I sometimes struggle with, the not feeling so much like an adult,
Right.
wondering what I was doing at that table. Did you go through that?
Never, not once.
You always felt comfortable at that table?
Yeah, never, ever, not for a moment did I ever have a doubt that, I shouldn't be here as much as anyone else. So this is another piece of advice I often give my children. My daughter, who's an artist, I would always tell her, why not your paintings? As long as there are walls in the world, why shouldn't it be your paintings hanging on them? Or, I mean, she does mostly mixed modality stuff and, sculpture and, performance art, stuff like that. But, on my very first day at walking into the Toronto Children's Aid Society, I walked into an office. There were 400 people at cubicles. It was the largest room I'd ever seen in my life. I mean, it's an agency with 1,000 employees. I walked in with a guy named Klaus, and he looked at me and he goes, I'm going to get lost in here. And I looked at him and I said, you never know, one day one of us might be running this place.
Well,
Yeah, and about 15 years later, Klaus, I bumped into Klaus, and he was at a cubicle at the Toronto Children's Aid Society, and I was senior staff out in Durham region with 400 people working for me. So, um, attitude is the one thing you could control. I mean, you don't have to read Viktor Frankl to know that. But it is the one thing you can control, regardless of the circumstances you find yourself in. And I believed, I looked at the executive directors that were around and the CEOs that were around, and I thought, well, there's no difference than them and me, except for the number of years they put in. And I can work as hard as anyone else. I'm probably, if not as intelligent, maybe just a little less intelligent than most of the people. Yeah. So it seemed to me, why not me? That was
Did you have any of what your dad had, which was a ruthlessness? Any of that?
No, I don't think
you didn't fight your way to the top.
No. Well, let me change that answer. Let me think about this. I can be pretty ruthless, I guess. Yeah, I'm just trying to think. When I used to be a competitive tennis player, before I had psoriasis, I was pretty ruthless in that.
Like how so? How did that play out?
Well, I was just vicious on the tennis court. I wanted to humiliate the people I played, especially I could find a way to hate them. And it helped me play better. I was one of the better players in the province. And so I played a lot of tennis, but then I went to sleepover camp, and that kind of ended my tennis while everyone was practicing 8 hours a day. I was at, Winnebago. And so,
great camp.
Yeah. So
how were you in camp? What were you like in camp?
Like probably just the same, like a middlingly popular person who glommed onto a couple kind of outcasty, eccentric-y kind of people at camp, and those were my friends. And I'm still in touch with one of them. And I've had the same, group of friends that I've had since high school. That's kind of me.
Yeah. So Brian, I'm really struggling a little bit to actually figure out your core. And what I mean by that, on one hand, you have this incredible confidence, the ability to rise up within an institution, organization, a sector, which is not easy to do. Yeah. On the other hand, when you were in camp, you had like 2 or 3 friends, 2 or 3 buddies. One would think, based on how you grew up, your parents partying all the time, there's incredible sense of joy in the house and laughter and craziness, that you would be like central to camp. You would be one of those guys that everybody knew. So I'm kind of trying to figure out who you are.
Yeah. If you figure it out, let me know. Let my wife know. It'll make her life a lot easier.
So are you all of that? I guess so, huh?
I guess I contain multitudes, as Walt Whitman would say, and Bob Dylan later quoted him, said the same thing. But I think I'm, I don't know, perhaps maybe there's an Adam 1 and an Adam 2 in me, to quote Soloveitchik a little bit. Part of me feels a sense of mastery over my, over the land, and over my universe, and, this constellation of things I've created and built, and I feel great pride in that and all of that. And part of me, feels like a little bit needy. That I'm never quite sure I'm on solid footing with what I'm doing. It's probably it probably is situational as well. Probably has to do with whatever I find myself doing. I never. Writing for me, I guess perhaps because the people I worshiped and the heroes I had as writers, it never struck me for a minute or a second that I could create a world in the same manner with which they did. And so I was reaching pretty high. I'll say that. Whereas work felt like, many times I felt like I could do that job quite easily. after a little while. There were no problems that were unique anymore, or that I hadn't seen anymore. At a certain point, everything was redundant. The people changed, the settings changed, but the problems and the what was required of me and expected of me, that didn't change.
So when you sit down and write, do you feel centered?
Yes.
Do you feel that you're at home?
Yes. I feel like I'm doing what I should have been doing in my 20s, what I was always meant to do, 100%. Yeah. And I'm absolutely comfortable with it at this point. I mean, I think it's like Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours, you know. I feel I'm okay if I sit down for 8 hours, like I did 2 days ago, and I write 3 sentences.
Really?
Or I may write 4 pages, but I'm okay with that because, you know, that second sentence was a hell of a sentence, Avrum, that I wrote.
Do you remember it? Do you remember it?
I don't remember it at all, but I remember thinking that's a hell of a sentence. That's worth a day. Yeah.
Brian, walk me through those 8 hours. So you're where do you sit when you write?
I'm in an office upstairs. I was on a corner of the couch for most of my life, or standing at the kitchen table with a box and my computer on top of a box. But when a little after the pandemic started, I created a nice little sort of, out of a guest room we have, I created an office for myself. I'm surrounded by pictures of Bob Dylan. I've got usually Bob Dylan, Joni Mitchell, Mozart on playing in the background. I don't hear it, I don't think, during the day. And I sit down. I know what I need to write that day because I plan out everything I write. So I know where I'm at. I have a kind of GPS around that sort of thing. And I either take a very small step in that direction, or I take a large step, or I write and I erase and I write and I erase and I write and I erase, or scratch out, or whatever I do. Sometimes in a notebook, sometimes in my computer, sometimes most of the time standing, sometimes sitting. And at the end of the day, I may have just written the entire day and just scrapped it, thrown it out.
How much do you eat?
I do eat. I've eaten a lot more in the last year and a half writing this book than I should have. But no, I'll come down around halfway through the day sometimes, or sometimes I'll be here for 6, 7, 8 hours, and my wife will scream at me saying, get out of that room, just walk somewhere, like just move around, get outside, go outside.
So that 8 hour
it goes time, 10 minutes. Yeah.
But what did you do were you sitting there thinking? Were you going on YouTube and watching RV videos? What were you doing?
No news, no YouTube. Writing. I'm engaged in writing. I'm engaged in, trying to write a perfect sentence.
So what was going on in your head for those 8 hours?
That's what's going on in my head. Am I expressing, are these sentences breathing like anxious people? Are they getting along with one another? Is there continuity between the paragraphs? What needs to be explained, what needs to be inferred, what needs to be in dialogue. It's all around the construction and building all that scaffolding around this, whatever I'm writing. It's all about that. It truly is on my mind, Avrum. And as my wife said, I'm living in 2 worlds all the time right now. There's the world of this book where, in a sense, I'm the God in that book. In that world, I'm controlling everything, but I leave them off at a certain point in time. And so they exist up until that point in time in my head, and their lives are going on, and they're going on in my head, and this other life, this other world is going on all around me. And I don't think that's unique for a writer. And I know, again, I've talked a lot about my wife, but I know she was quite happy when I finished Uriel through Eleanor, because the book took a lot out of me.
Did it?
Yeah. There were times when my own tears were on the page in front of me,
Really?
more than words. Yeah. Um, I had to go away to write one of the chapters. There's a chapter where Eleanor's mother, Frida, describes her time in the concentration camp on her deathbed. And I knew I would never get that written if I had anyone around me or any interruptions at all. So I rented a little place in like this little working class um, enclave in upstate New York on a marina, where people spend all their money on their boats and no money on their homes whatsoever. The homes look like little portables.
Yeah.
And I sat in that portable for about 4 or 5, 6 days and just wrote day and night to write that chapter. And that chapter was written that was written in sweat and blood and tears, that chapter, for sure.
Was it therapeutic for you?
Um, I'm not sure if it was therapeutic for me. It was just a necessary process for me to get through it. There wasn't therapy involved for me in writing this book at all. It was a book I wanted to write. It was a book I'm very proud of.
Yeah.
I'm proud of the subject matter. I'm proud of the fact that there's no ambiguity about good and evil, especially in contrast to the world we live in today, where it seems like for some people there's a strange ambiguity about what's good and what's evil.
Yeah.
That makes no sense whatsoever.
Yes.
Therapeutic, I'm not sure, but I'm certainly proud of my accomplishment.
Is there any insanity to the whole thing? Do you ever get lost in the story?
Of course. I mean, it's an insane thing. I mean, think about it. I'm sitting all alone.
Yeah.
I'm writing this book, Uriel through Eleanor. I'm taking a genre that's pretty static, which is a memoir. It turns out, as a reader, you would know 10 pages in, you realize, my God, this isn't Uriel's memoir. This isn't the memoir of someone who liberated a concentration camp. This is the memoir of the person he's dictating it to. So I took this relatively static genre, and it's a memoir inside a memoir. And it really is Eleanor's story. I mean, she's aware of a connection the two have going back to the time when he liberated a concentration camp, and he's not aware of it. And you realize about, I think probably 20, 25 pages in that she's interpreting what he's saying.
Yeah.
Whether she's trustworthy or not, she's probably trustworthy, but that's a question maybe in the back of your head. And she's appropriating his memoir and telling him, I'm a main character in your memoir. He wants no part of that. And then eventually she just starts inserting her own chapters into his memoir.
Yeah.
And it's her story. It really is Uriel through Eleanor. So again, there's some madness to that. I mean, how's that going to be received? A book like this. Also taking on the show or taking on the Holocaust as subject matter. What do I know about that? I know I've met a lot of survivors. My wife is the child of a survivor. I've met soldiers who have liberated concentration camps. But that was the extent of my knowledge. So you'll find a book that is not unlike a lot of my other books in that you have two characters that have an uncomfortable kind of outsider existence in the world or their worlds a little bit, although she's much probably healthier than he is a little bit. So in that way, it felt familiar to me. Those parts felt familiar. It's also, really satirical in between being deadly serious. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a couple chapters when he goes to basic training, Uriel. And I mean, I just had fun with poking fun at the Canadian Army, which
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
I know nothing about, but, it's supposed to be, basic training. It's, you watch movies with drill sergeants and stuff like that. And of course, it's none of that. I mean, on the most difficult day they're ever going to experience their whole lives, the drill sergeant takes them to some forest and they have to hike through it, find this flag, and it's going to be the most difficult day of their lives. And of course, every 5 minutes they come across a cool stream and berry bushes, blackberries and raspberries, and they walk out of that forest at the end of the day and they're singing, their stomachs are full, their faces are stained with blue.
Yeah, that was good. That was good.
And, it's just sort of fun. The other part I kind of poked, or that's satirical in a way, is that they're really worried about anti-Semitism, and how are they going to be treated in the army? And it turns out the fact that they're Jewish ends up, keeping them off the front lines, keeping them probably safer than they ever imagined, until, of course, they're left on, on their own, basically, emotionally, spiritually, intellectually, to try to make sense of what they're seeing, like every other soldier. But, for the most part, being Jewish actually protects them. And this drives Eleanor crazy, of course, because she's like, you're a Jew in the 40s and you experience like no anti-Semitism, In fact, it turns out, that people go out of their way to help them in many ways, until they meet one particular soldier. So anyway, it was, in that way, it was familiar, because it had a type of satire I like to write with, but very unfamiliar for me. It truly was putting my nightmares down on paper.
So the book is partially you then?
I think probably all books are partially me, though they're my imagination. Uriel is unlike anyone I've ever met. Eleanor is unlike anyone I've ever met. They're I hope, fully imagined, complex human beings that have come out of my own imagination. That's what they are. Not since Auden Triller has a character, I think, resembled me to any extent. Yeah.
So when you set up for your next novel, is it a challenge to you because there was so much invested in this one? Or is it, okay, I take a little time, I breathe, stand up at my box, and I get going again? Well, how does that work?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I mean, I was exhausted at the end of this. I find it takes a real physical toll on me. Again, because I tend to be a little too sedentary, and I'm living 24 hours a day. I wake up at 1 a.m. thinking about something. I'll have to write it down or text myself something or email something to myself. So yes, my downtime was I wrote a book of poetry.
Yeah.
And finished it. I decided I was going to write 150 poems in 150 days. And I did that. And it's called Bending in the Direction of Her Sentences.
Yeah.
It's about two poets who, well, they're not quite in love. One poet's in love with the other poet is tolerating one poet. And that's sort of the loose arc that winds its way through these poems. And it was lovely to wake up every morning thinking my work today is to write a poem. And so that was a bit of downtime. And now I'm back into another book.
I'd like to read a poem to you if you're okay. It's a poem about a poet, and it's written by virtual intelligence.
Oh.
I've been dabbling with virtual intelligence a little bit in terms of helping.
Like AI?
Yeah.
Well, wow.
Okay. Yeah. Have you ensconced yourself in that at all?
So I found it really helpful. Not to write a single line, because I wouldn't do that, because God knows where it's pulling the words from. It could be pulling it from some other writer. I don't want to do that. But I found it really helpful. For instance, I would just, say, hey, whether I was using Google or ChatGPT or one of the AI search engines, I would just say, hey, did Canadian soldiers during World War II sleep with their boots on?
Mm-hmm.
Boy, that saves a lot of time, for you. What color were their pup tents that they slept in? Did they share a pup tent? Did they sleep alone? Like stuff like that. What happened the night before Germany surrendered?
Mm-hmm.
it was things like that. You know, where did most survivors, where did they end up? Once they were liberated from concentration camps, kind of in that purgatorial period before they could go home to nothing, or maybe some sort of discarded, lost, meandering relative that perhaps survived.
I often wonder about that research aspect of writing, or of your writing specifically. For instance, when you're sitting down, let's say you're doing your 8-hour day, and you come to a detail that you simply don't know the answer to, and for whatever reason, you're not going to, to the computer for it. Do you leave a blank and come back to it later?
No,
you
I
do not.
make it up. Almost every detail is made up. They're literary devices. That's why there's just a disclaimer at the start of the book. People have often. I wrote a book called "God Might Forgive Gershwin Burr" about a thief who has a traumatic event in his childhood. He ends up becoming a thief, pretty successful, till he ends up in jail. Pretty successful dude. But there's a whole chapter on lockpicking, on safe cracking. And people are like, wow, you must have done a lot of research. No, I didn't do any research. It's my imagination. Mm-hmm. I imagined, what type of lockpicking would this character engage in? So, yes, there's a concentration camp in my book. It's not named. I believe the sentiment is correct. I believe the horror is correct. I believe that, there are aspects of what happened that are absolutely correct. But as far as the minutia is concerned, like I said in the author's note at the start of the book, I'm pretty sure you could probably find many inaccuracies if that's what you're into. But what's accurate, and again, I wrote this at the start of the book, what's accurate is that I'm pretty sure from all the survivors I spoke with over the years and everything I've read, the sentiment is that, they may have left the camps, but the camps never left them.
You were saying.
That's really what I was trying to get at.
You were saying. Is it okay that the minutia is not accurate?
Yeah, I'm fine.
It is okay?
Yeah, because I'm acknowledging it. I'm saying it's not. What I did find, and my book does deal with, some really disturbing, there are really disturbing scenes of rape and sexual assault against a particular woman in this book. And that's one of the unwritten stories about the Holocaust. And I thought, wow, this is really timely, especially given what happened on October 6th.
To 7th, by the way.
Sorry, October 7th. What happened on October 7th?
Although 6th, I'm sure, was significant as well.
Yeah, what happened on, sorry about that. What happened on October 7th, and I always get January 6th and October 7th.
I hear you.
I mix those dates. They
natural mistake. Yeah.
I shouldn't at all. And I'm sorry if I offended anyone. And so, but especially after what happened on October 7th and the especial torment and torture that Israeli women faced that day, I feel like in many ways my book would feel quite validating to many women who have suffered sexual assault and suddenly suddenly faced a world that was saying, your firsthand account doesn't count anymore. For the first time in the history of sexual assaults, as far as I remember, were discredited or dismissed, or people said it requires more evidence, something like that. But there are firsthand accounts in my book of sexual assaults that went on. And when I was doing a bit of research on that aspect of World War II, it's quite interesting. There were people who have made forays into studying that, and they did meet with resistance around writing about that, because there was a thought that perhaps it took away from the greater story of the Holocaust, which was the death of 6 million Jews, and that we shouldn't get bogged down in, lesser evils. But for me, evil's evil. And I told you, like I said at the start, evil is evil, and it's unambiguous evil in this book. It's not hard to pick out who's good or who's bad in many ways. I think I tackled a subject or subject matter that's not often tackled.
When you finished writing about such things as rape, did you feel physically dirty? Did you have to go shower?
I didn't feel physically dirty. I felt like I had, I felt like I had honored. I felt good about it. I felt like I had honored survivors and female survivors in a way perhaps they haven't been honored enough, empathized with enough. So I felt proud of myself for that, actually.
I knew a survivor of the Holocaust who had been experimented on by Mengele.
Yeah.
His name should be erased. And it was so uncomfortable. I'm a very curious person, and I like to ask questions, and I like to learn things from everybody. But I couldn't ask her questions. It was just way too uncomfortable for me.
Yeah.
Right. I felt like I was getting somewhere where I may touch a chord in her that she just doesn't want to go to. And I myself felt there was for lack of a better word, there was like a dirtiness to the whole thing. I was like pulling her clothes off. I didn't want to do that.
Yeah, I understand it. And there's a point in the book where Uriel says he had no idea this was going on during the Holocaust.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Because women weren't talking about it either. And when he hears Frida's story, or what happened to Frida, even though he walked right in to a concentration camp, interacted with as many women as men, maybe, or probably more men than women, but he had no clue that was part of the story of the Holocaust.
I still want to read this poetry, but I'm so intrigued. I know I'm so intrigued by where we're going. I have a overall question with all of this that you know, and all those individuals whom you have spoken with over the years through your work and through your writing, and just life in general. What's your general overview of humankind? How do you see us?
Well, it's just madness and absurdity, isn't it? I mean, we're here for a lightning flash. I mean, the universe is billions of years old, and we're here for a nanosecond, less than a nanosecond. And still we find ways to, subjugate, torture, hurt, kill, destroy other people's lives with that knowledge in our mind that we get this like fleeting opportunity at happiness that, again, against the backdrop of the universe, we're here for a split second on Earth. I mean, and yet we've constructed a planet, we've constructed governments, we've constructed in and out groups, we've constructed society in a way that just disadvantages so many people and makes that split second opportunity they have to enjoy life almost impossible. And we're okay with that for the large part. We're fine. We're okay with having 94% of society as a kind of discard society, and 6 or 7% of people getting their needs met in the world. So it's just I think it's just madness, and obviously it's too big to kind of, I think, grapple with. So I think for a large part, I try to grapple with it in individual stories. It's like eating an elephant one bite at a time, I think.
Yeah.
So I've taken a couple bites out of that elephant.
Where do you start with the elephant? Where do you start eating it? There's a joke in there somewhere. But let me,
yeah, that's okay. No one's asked that question ever. I mean, immediately, like, really disgusting thoughts cross my mind. But
Brian, just to be serious,
the ears would be logical, wouldn't it?
I was thinking the trunk.
Really?
Like you could fill it like Kishka with stuff, Brian.
Yeah.
With all of that, and I hear what you're saying, and I often think of that. You're here for a blip. Make it great. How could you possibly spend your life hurting people like the mafia? But with that,
Yeah.
do you see the greens, the lush of the forest as you
It's
drive past their old bales? Do you see it?
it's hard for me. It really is very difficult for me, particularly over the last couple of years, over the last years. It does seem like the world's a bit upside down right now. I'm finding it hard to see through the morass of cruelty and madness and things like that. So I think it's somewhat difficult. You know, I see it in I see it in my love for my children, in the potential they have, in what good, they're good people. You know, I think that's sustaining in some way, in a really good way. My love for my wife is sustaining. There are people who love me in the world, which is, defies all logic. I'm sure
Yes, it does. No.
you felt the same way. I'm sitting in a little office, like 7 or 8 hours a day, trying to write pretty sentences. I mean, what is that? I mean, that in and of itself is a form of madness, you know?
Well, all those years that you spent helping people, do you figure, okay, I've spent a lot of my life doing good. Now I can really focus on my passion, which is me.
Um, I I see it as I wish I had started in my 20s writing, but I also it doesn't mean that there's not room for me to feel, a sense of accomplishment, and also a sense that I did improve the world a little bit, as much as I could, to the best of my ability. I think there are a lot of children and families who are better off today because of something I had a hand in helping them with, and that's a good feeling. Of course, that's a good feeling, and that's a legacy feeling that I have. Uh, you know, um,
Other than a drive to see how two words put together may sound, or the elegance of a wonderfully penned
yeah.
phrase, is there another reason that you write?
Well, I think it was like Vladimir Nabokov, maybe, or someone said it's like everyone writes for the same reason. I can't remember the quote exactly, but I think it was something about scratching at immortality. And I think that probably is as close to it. It's not enough for me to leave children behind and relationships behind. And I don't know why, Avrum. I can't psychoanalyze myself except to say that my heroes were songwriters and writers, and and I wanted to leave something beautiful behind, a work of art, something that maybe 100 years from now someone could pick up and read and think that's a beautiful work of art. I think that's probably as close as I can get to thinking about it. I don't think about it a lot. In fact, I rarely ever think about it. Like I said, mostly I'm thinking about um, pleasing myself when in my writing. If I'm happy with it, I'm happy with it. That's most of the time. I'm not thinking about whatever reader might think or what readers are out there. I'm thinking that I have a pretty high standard for myself, and if I can meet that standard, that's good.
In terms of popularity, do you want to be a Salinger? Would that be the best case scenario?
It would be wonderful, sure. That'd be fantastic. I mean, just because there would be opportunities that would present themselves. I could go write, on a Greek island maybe for a couple of years. I guess that would be nice.
Or Hemingway in Spain or something.
Maybe, but no, I'm comfortable right now. I'm writing. I have a supportive publisher. My last book this book is doing really well. It was on Amazon. It was the #1 book in 20th century historical fiction recently for a little while. It was #5 in literary fiction in Canada for a while. So it's done it's done really well as a book, and I'm getting really good feedback, which is making me feel really good about the book, because a lot of people have said to me, once they get to the second half of this book, I've had 3 separate people have said to me that they actually got out of bed and went back to the book because they wanted to finish it. And that feels that feels good. I mean, you're a creative person. When someone says, I'm looking at a piece of your art and it's taken my breath away, or
you feel like $1 million.
Yeah, it feels fantastic. Absolutely.
So you don't have an end game in sight other than just to write.
No, as long as I stay healthy and with it enough to write. Like I said, I feel like that's what I was meant to do, and I'm hoping to do it for as long as possible. Until I get fed back to the earth.
Is your imagination growing?
I think it's shrinking a little bit, and it's a little bit harder or more difficult because I'm getting older. Like my wife, like I'm a slow Jeopardy champion. Like if you listen to a question Jeopardy and then pause it, I can come up with the answer in about 3 minutes. Right? So my recall's not as good. I don't, things don't come as easy as they did when I was in my 30s as far as writing is concerned. But I feel, the same mastery over the work. And I feel like I've always had a very good imagination. The imagination's a small part of it. It's just hard work. I mean, you just have to, it's like any job. I've approached it like, you know what I mean? I mean, what stops most people from writing novels is they have a fantasy about writing a novel that like you see in a movie where a guy sits at a typewriter, or a woman, it's an old-fashioned typewriter all the time.
Yes.
And then they don't write for a long period of time, and their publisher is begging them, oh, I need your next manuscript. By the way, no publisher gives a crap about anyone's next manuscript, except for maybe a couple dozen writers in the whole world. But anyway, whatever. But I mean, and then suddenly 2 nights in a fit of like creative fury, they just start typing, and then you watch in the movie, the pages just start rising beside the typewriter. No, I mean, it takes years to write a book, or a year and a half in my case to 2 years to write a book. So it's perseverance, I think, most of all. And I've often said that writing a novel is a war against impatience. And it really is. And you have to have the patience because there aren't any shortcuts. I'm not William Faulkner. I can't write as I lay dying in 7 days. Only God, William Faulkner can create miracles like that, create a world in 7 days.
I'm astounded by certain writers' abilities to put out a book every year.
Yeah.
It's incredible to me.
Yeah.
So I have this poem here, and it's a poem about a poet. I think you have a poetic way about you.
Thank you.
So I thought that I would go to the computer and see what it could say about you. So here it is. In twilight's hush, where whispers blend with dusk, a poet weaves with words both fierce and soft. Their pen a wand that conjures worlds from dust, and dreams take flight on parchment, sweet and loft. In quiet rooms where shadows softly play, the poet's thoughts, like rivers, gently flow, each line a star that guides the heart's array, and every verse a seed of light to sow. They chase the echoes of a fleeting muse, a fleeting spark that dances through their mind. In ink-stained hands the fleeting thoughts infuse, a tapestry where truth and art entwine. Yet in their soul a tempest's roar may swell, for beauty's crafted from a storm within, to find the words where fragile moments dwell, and capture whispers where the night begins. So each verse a fragment of their grace, a poet's heart laid bare in ink and rhyme, and through their lines we glimpse a sacred space where time is still and words defy the climb.
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think?
I think it's very pretty. It's a lovely poem.
Yeah.
And a machine wrote it.
And a machine wrote it. A machine wrote it. What does that tell you?
Yeah. Well, tells me eventually they'll be writing better books than any human being can write, I guess.
Is that what's going to happen?
I'm not sure. I don't know. I mean, it's a beautiful. I think it's a lovely poem. I don't know how much of it is
Original.
it's like a quilt. I don't know how much of it is like an AI quilt written from lines from a billion other poems, obscure and well known.
Yeah.
So that I don't know. But I would say that, Joni Mitchell singing "I Wish I Had a River to Skate On" is just as beautiful as that entire poem.
If not more.
Yeah.
Well, I think because there's a soul behind Joni Mitchell's song, and there's not one behind this.
Right.
Although I understand what you're saying about patchwork. I mean, essentially that's what AI does, right?
Yeah.
But anyways, I just wanted to get your take on that. When you write poetry, is that a mini novel, a poem?
No, it's an entirely different experience for me. In fact, I think it's like my default setting. I would much rather spend my life writing poetry.
Why?
I really enjoy it a lot. I mean, I really think that I have a poet's sentimentality in my writing, and it's what I started writing. I started writing poems like a lot of writers started writing poems. They're just more accessible. I mean, a novel was so unthinkable that someone could write it. I could write a novel, but many of my novel ideas end up as poems. That's as far as they get. I'll say that, or perhaps they end up as short stories. But I think I mean, I have a love of poetry that's different than a love of any other type of writing. I mean, poems take my breath away when I read them. I've read poems by Seamus Heaney or Czeslaw Milosz or Pablo Neruda or other poets that have just, again, I've read them 1,000 times because I'm astounded by them. I read a poem called "Farewell" by Galway Connell a while ago that just stunned me, floored me. I mean, I carried it around for 2 days reading it, thinking, how did he do that?
Is that what it is? How did he do that? Is that what stuns you?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. How do you fit, how do you fit a universe of emotion between, 8 lines of poetry? How do you get that in there? How does that happen? How have you taken my breath away? Or how have you created a universal experience for me in 7 lines of poetry? But how is that humanly possible? It's like the first time I looked at a Marc Chagall. I just thought that, what? That can't be. No one can do that. That's impossible.
Yeah.
How did he walk this earth?
Now, do you ever achieve that yourself?
In poems, I felt
you do achieve it.
What's that? Sorry.
You do achieve that moment.
Sometimes in poems, and
like you'll take your breath away from yourself.
Sometimes I'll write a poem and I'll just be, I'll be so happy with it. I'll read it for 3 or 4 days. And but on the conversely, there's sometimes I know something's just a little bit off, and so for 3 or 4 days it'll drive me crazy. I mean, it's a Princess and the Pea kind of thing, especially since I'm trying to reach for, like Isaac Singer said, if you want to be respected as a writer, you have to write about big subjects, life and death subjects, and so I'm trying to do that. So my books, I think a lot of are with people struggling with not just struggling in relationships, but struggling with the bigger questions in life. What am I doing here on earth? What am I meant to do here on earth? Where am I? What am I good for? there's a big empty space above my head. And there's perhaps some divine being with his ears stopped up because there's so much inhumanity and evil in this world. There can't possibly be someone overseeing everything we're doing. How do I make sense of that? And how do my characters make sense of that? I mean, how do you come to terms with things like that? I mean, my characters are often, they don't voice it a lot of times, but they're saying to themselves, okay,
Yes.
the real miracle of religion is that, it's still perceived as a moral authority by billions of people, in the face of these horrifying, inhuman, immoral acts that were perpetrated by its leaders and champions throughout history. How do you do it? How do you make sense of that? That stuff. And my characters are doing that. And they're particularly doing that in Uriel through Eleanor. The book was inspired in many ways by a number of just little vignettes or little scenes in my life. I mean, there's a Bob Dylan song called Precious Angel during his Christian period, where he talks about how men will pray God to kill them, but they won't be able to die. That's how much pain that sometimes people are in. There was a moment where my son and I were driving through upstate Michigan on our way to Hibbing, Minnesota, to do a pilgrimage to Bob Dylan's birth site. And we're in a little restaurant, and it was just after Charlottesville, with the tiki torches, and the Jews will not replace us, chants, and all of that.
Yeah.
What were they called?
White supremacists.
White supremacists, yeah. And, good people on both sides, those people.
Indeed.
Yeah. Anyway, we're in a restaurant, and there was a table of veterans sitting there. And one of them said to the group, we were like just probably 5 feet away from them. And one of them said to the group of other veterans, they'd clearly been meeting at this restaurant it was either upstate Michigan or upstate Wisconsin or upstate Minnesota, I can't remember. But it was one of those places. I think Michigan, because I remember there weren't any vegetables anywhere to be found. A vegetable was a fried potato in Michigan. I think in upstate Michigan.
I'm familiar with that narrative.
Everyone was big. Anyway, so one of them says hey, did you see what's going on in Charlottesville? Did you see that? What happened on TV? And I kicked my son under the table, and I go, oh, here comes the anti-Semitism from, this table of white guys, and they're like not in uniforms, but they all dress the same, in their hunting caps and their lumberjack shirts or whatever the dress was. And you know what? They looked at each other and they said, I thought we wiped out those Nazis. What the F are they doing back here?
Yeah.
What are they doing? They said, and then another one said, I'd like to replace all those guys. And I thought, holy crap. I mean, for them, again, and so part of the book was inspired by just this awe for that generation of mostly men, I guess, who went off to fight, though there were women, obviously, women survivors and women who played a big part in the war. But these men who went off to do their duty, I mean, they were the silent generation or the great generation. But after we ate, I walked over to that table, and I just want to let you know, I overheard your conversation and what you said about those Nazis that were marching in Charlottesville. And I really want to thank you for that. That kind of moral clarity, I don't hear it or see it a lot. And
what was their response?
They sort of just stared at me and went, thank you. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
They just were very polite men, And then my son and I left. Everyone there sounded like they were from the movie Fargo.
Fargo. It's a great movie, by the way. Yeah.
Like everyone was talking like this, to us. They were like, you guys like a potato, like a really good one? So we were kind of like doing our Fargo voices the entire trip.
So Brian, with all of that, do you know why you're here?
Yeah, I don't know why I'm lucky enough.
Even though you ensconce yourself in writing all the time and
it feels
really make an effort to churn out, great novels, would that not be why you're here?
No, I think it's just a random confluence of events that put me here. Avrum, I really, really do. And I'm just really trying to make the best of it. I truly believe that. I mean, I won the lottery so many times. I mean, I'm able-bodied. I was born in Canada. I mean, it's not for there are many reasons why kitchens and death camps or concentration camps are referred to as Canada. I mean, it's not for it's not there's a lot of reasons behind that. Not that our country didn't have a pretty jaded gold medal performance when it came to hating Jews, although hating indigenous people more. But as a white, able-bodied male, I kind of won a lottery. So
I feel that too myself.
So I'm infinitely grateful. I grew up where there weren't bombs falling on me. I didn't face a lot of anti-Semitism, a little bit of it, not a lot of it. And no, I just feel like what can I do to the best of my ability, so that at the end of my life I could say, okay, I didn't waste it. I think that's it for me. I don't think I think beyond that.
Do you drink?
No.
One would think you would,
Yeah, no, I don't drink. I'll have a glass of wine every month or so, maybe. I have a coffee in the morning.
How do you self-soothe?
I've had my whole life, I've had, like struggles with depression, anxiety. I think it's mostly because, during my formative years, I was just waiting for the next eruption on my skin to just I was waiting for my life to collapse all around me again. And so I think I'm kind of hardwired as a 15-year-old who feels like he missed out on a lot of life because of that. So, I do take some medication for depression, anxiety, stuff like that.
Who doesn't?
But that's helped. I have to say that's helped. I don't know if I should be I don't even know if I should be disclosing stuff.
No. It's fantastic what you're doing. It's great what you're doing.
But that's anyways. But I need that, I think, to cope a little bit. And it's more knowing it's there, I think, than taking it. At this point in my life, I doubt, because I haven't, like, whatever I've taken, the dose hasn't changed in so long. I'm sure my body's accommodated to it long ago, but I think it's just the mere fact of having it there in case the world does suddenly.
I carry Xanax in my pocket, and I have for 20 years.
Yeah.
And when I go up and speak, or when I go up and lead a service, 200, 300, 400, 500 people, I usually take a Xanax before, because I have panic attacks. And that's very helpful. Listen, I want to really take this moment. I want to take advantage of it. For people who are going through skin ailments today, as you did, do you have some words of wisdom for them, Brian?
Well, again, if you can, you're at an age where just the medical technology is phenomenal right now. So, I took all sorts of experimental drugs. It gave me impaired kidney functioning. It did some terrible things, thinned my skin, stuff like that. But right now, if you have psoriasis, you can go see your doctor and probably go on. Like I said, I take one pill a day now, and my skin's basically clear. I would never have in my life thought of that. But probably the advice I would give myself is that the world really doesn't care as much as you do about what you look like or whether you have blemishes on your skin. And that it doesn't mean you can't touch or hold another human being, or you can't, go out in a pair of shorts and a t-shirt, or you can't enjoy life. That's your attitude holding you back, maybe to some extent, although I'm not very good at taking that advice. I still obsess if, like, I have a small breakout or eruption or something like that, you know what I mean? So, because I'm a 15-year-old again.
I get it.
In my head. But be honestly, no one's paying attention to me. I'm paying way more attention to myself than anyone else is. So, you know, my advice is that you know, just don't let it hold you back. You're going to die anyway, whether you have beautiful complexion or not. You get a finite amount of time, and you're that's it. You know, you're going to die. What's the old Italian proverb that whether you're a king or a pawn or a, you know, we all end up in the same box at the end of the game. It's like it's a chess metaphor. So
I'm not sure to be joyous after this interview or just to go and drink a bottle of tequila. I'm not quite sure. You're an interesting guy, Brian. You're a really interesting guy. You have a lot of dimensions to you, a lot.
oh,
Really, on one hand, you're incredibly passionate about life. On the other hand, it's sort of like, fuck this, right?
well, and again, I think if you read my books, you'll find that tension is
There is a tension like that. Yes.
it's always there, you know. Yeah, it's there's that, and there is that tension all the time for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really happy.
My grandmother, I'll just leave you with my grandmother,
Please.
Min, my father's mother, used to say to me, she sensed this tension inside me all the time, long before I had any skin issues, anything like that. She used to say to me, she goes, Brian, life is really good if you let it.
Amen.
She used to say that to me.
Amen.
Yeah. I'm still working at it.
We all are. That probably sounds really nice in Yiddish, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's not even try. Don't even try. I'm thinking, how am I going to do this right?
Well, I could just Google Translate it.
Yeah, that's exactly. We'll do that later. I'll be in touch. But listen, I want to thank you very much for this. Really.
Thank you, Avrum. It's honestly, it's always a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you. Thank you. I really enjoyed it, and I feel that I've gotten to know you so much better through this interview than I did on round one.
Yeah.
I think that speaks to you being far more open than you were.
You know what? I think you're right. I mean, because at the time I was still living that Brian Prousky first life I wrote about, you know. And I wanted to be mindful and respectful of the people that invested a lot in me, not to say anything that would compromise them or the organization in any way. So, you know, because it was a pretty public-facing job. So
It was.
yeah. So I think you're right. I think that's the case. Whereas right now I feel kind of liberated in a way.
Well, you speak that way, you act that way, and because of that, I mean, this is what I want in my interviews. I want to be able to speak with really someone who has worked stuff through, or at least to an extent. And you have. You thought about life. You thought about who you are. You ponder the big questions. Sometimes you have answers. Sometimes you don't. But that's okay.
Yeah.
So I feel as though I was with a whole person here.
That's really nice. Can I share a poem with you, Avrum?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to share because I do have a book of poetry coming out. I have no idea when yet. I don't have a date for it, but I'm hoping in the next 3 or 4 months. They're spare poems, but I think this gives you a sense of the way I think of the world. And I'm only going to read it because I think it fits in with the conversation we have, and because you read me a lovely poem. This is it. It has no title. Yesterday I came to a place of soft grass in the shade, where sparrows sang and cicadas hissed and rapids percolated, and leaves swung and swished in a breeze. I lay down and closed my eyes and thought, perhaps there's a heavenly conductor of these ensemble sounds, and wondered why he was here and not where he was needed.
Lovely. Lovely. Thank you.
Thanks, Avrum.
I have a bit of poetry here myself, but it's an advertisement. Not iambic pentameter, but it pays the bills.
Mine was an advertisement too.
Yeah, I know. I got that. The Avrum Rosensweig Show is sponsored by the Professional Center, Toronto's lead co-working space where excellence is the norm. From private sunlit offices to fully equipped meeting rooms, their spaces are designed to allow you to focus and get to work. At TPC, they combine high-end amenities with unparalleled service, ensuring your office experience meets the highest standards. Discover why TPC offers more sophistication, more privacy, and more opportunities to grow. For more information, visit theprofessionalcenter.com. And if you mention my name, AVRUM, you'll get 10% off private offices and meeting rooms. It's incredible how important that is, isn't it?
Yes.
No, really. It's like without this, I couldn't continue the show.
Yeah.
And here you and I are talking about life and death situations.
Yeah.
But this is equal, I don't know, equally, but it's very important.
Of course.
I want to thank everybody for listening, for watching. It's been a wonderful interview, as I said. And I want to thank my very dear friend, Brian Prousky. In the world of entertainment, you'll notice that entertainment's often use such phrases as, oh, my very dear friend, Brian Prousky. Now, Brian and I see each other once every year or two. But, right? So does that constitute my very dear friend? Well, I say dear friend, partially because I'm an entertainer and I'm full of shit. But the other thing, too, is that Brian, whenever we talk, there's always this great sense that we're engaged and that we're opening up with one another. I don't think we hide from each other. And that's why I call you my dear friend. That's why.
It's an honor to be your friend, Avrum.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you. Anyways, I wish everybody well, and we look forward to being with you once again. Stay tuned. I'll be speaking with Rabbi Shlomo Gomara in a couple of days in our Parsha and Prose series, which is really quite incredible. Firstly, because the man is truly, truly a scholar. And secondly, because what we do is we take a look at the Torah portion through the lens of great literature. So a few weeks ago, we did a Parsha through the lens of the death of Ivan Ilyich, and it was phenomenal. It was a lot of fun, and it was really, really interesting. So stay tuned for that. Until then, we look forward to seeing you. Follow the words of these interviews, man. Make your life great. Pursue your passion. Get in the zone. There is nothing like it because we are only here for a blip.